All right, folks, Jesse Warden here, going to teach you some advanced array concepts, and we're going to use them sometimes with some loops. So we're going to use the existing for loop you already learned. We're going to do some array stuff because a lot of arrays and lists of data tend to be synonymous with loops. Now, arrays in general are usually used for storing items in a sequential order, right? But because they're in a sequential order, there's some pros and cons. The pros are you have basically numerical addresses for where they are. And you have a variety of ways that you can sort them very quickly to update things that depend on them or show them. So for example, if you're showing a list of customer contacts from a database, for example, or if you're doing a game, you're showing a list of characters from a game, and you want to sort by, whoever's got the lowest hit points or whatever else, you can use those array sorting mechanisms and it'll reflect that in your UI, right? So arrays, it all comes down to arrays and using the built-in methods and properties that they have to do fun, really fast, cool things. There are a ton of libraries out there, open source libraries, pay-for libraries, that have methods, extensions around arrays and around list-based concepts. And the reason that is twofold. Number one, a lot of what I'm going to show you isn't always cross-browser, cross-platform. A lot of these array functions and things like that were added in later versions of browsers, and they differ in ways in which they work. Very subtle sometimes. So for the most part, you don't have to worry about that. You can write your code and test it and you'll be fine. The only thing you really have to be massively concerned about is sorting. Can slightly throw you off if you have to use your own sort algorithm. Most of you who graduate from watching all these videos, you'll probably be using a library such as underscore or a lot of the built-in ones from Angular, backbone, Ember, all of those. They'll handle a lot of those things for you. You don't have to worry about it. But it's good to know how they work. And it's good if you're on a deadline, you want to know how the basics of an array work so you can quickly do it. This is how you get it done, okay? So there are two ways to create an array, really three, but we're going to concern ourselves with two. The first is just the standard initialization with left bracket, right bracket. So this will create an empty array. You can also add things. Now, I've shown you this before, so we're going to do it again. Jesse, Brandy, and Toby. Now, it doesn't matter what data types they are, okay? JavaScript has typeless arrays. I mean, it doesn't care what types in them. It doesn't care if they're mixed types. Additionally, you can put all kinds of whack data in there, such as null, undefined, 34, and it doesn't affect anything, right? It'll still count that this array has 6 items. Right? So if we were to trace this out, we're going to say console, learn to spell, Mr. Warden. We're going to print this out. Let's go to console and show you. Get rid of that. So you can see that it has that many items, and we can say, all right, well, list. What is list? Okay, there it is. What's list.length? Right? Well, list.length is 6, okay? There are some languages, such as Lua and others, that have optimizations built in that if they encounter a null or an undefined or something that's nothing, that they'll consider it a length. JavaScript doesn't care. JavaScript's like, look, null is just as valid as undefined. We are a non-prejudiced language here. We accept everyone for who they are, even if they don't actually exist and they're nothing. If there's 2 nothings that have different names, we accept them as well. Right? That's JavaScript for you. So, that's the basics of initializing an array. You can put whatever you want in it. Now, I've shown you length. You've gotten length, right? The normal way to access items in an array is using the same exact brackets you use to define it, and that is list. So, all items in an array have positions. We're going to access item 1. So what is position 1? So position 1 is actually 0. And again, that's because JavaScript arrays, and JavaScript language in general, is 0-based. That means that all arrays start with 0 and go up from there, okay? There is no such thing as a -1, right? That's like some quantum mechanics stuff that doesn't exist. So we say list of 0, that's Jesse. List of 1 is going to be Brandy. A list of 6 doesn't exist. It's going to be null, or undefined in this case. It's actually not null. It's undefined because it doesn't exist. Versus null, which actually is a valid value. That means nothing. List of 5 is the last item in the array. Okay, which is 34. So that is how you access array indices via an index to get a specific position in the array. Okay, now those positions can change if the order of the items in the array change. So for example, let's do in a list.sort. Now remember, sort function or sort method of arrays has an optional parameter of compare function. We are not going to provide one right now. We're just going to say, hey, can you just sort the array and figure it out? That means it'll sort the strings alphabetically and do some odd things with null, undefined, and numbers. So let's see what happens to sort it. So 34 is obviously greater than my wife, because, you know, that's just her Majesty in 34. I'll take the 34. I don't know what I'm supposed to do with this 34. You know, I can't get married, can't have kids. But whatever. So that's how it sorts it. What we're concerned about really is Brandy, Jesse, and Toby. It sorted it alphabetically, right? And it's, you know, reasonably fast. So if you want to sort an array, you can do that. You can call it again, right? And it does nothing differently. You could also provide a series of options to sort it, such as the compare function, which allows you to configure how it sorts things, right? This is what a lot of the advanced libraries handle. This is also the cross-compatibility browser thing that's different. For example, Chrome will handle null returns differently than other browsers, okay? So, and then this is different in WebKit too. So that's how you sort an array. Now we can add things to an array in 3 ways as well. You've seen, well, actually more than 3, a lot. You've seen how we can add it by initializing. You've also seen how you can add it via, let's set the next item in the array equal to cheese muffin. Okay, so what is the list looking now? So the very last item is cheese muffin. We set that particular position in the array. We can also set position 25 equal to holy fish. Right? We list it out. It'll give us undefined by 18. That is a helpful way to say, look, there's 18 positions from this point on that have undefined in it, right? So if you don't even say to have null, it's just going to put undefined because there's nothing there. But it will allocate that position for at least a slot waiting to put a value in it. In this case, the value defaults to undefined. Right? All right, so what is list 20 then? It should be undefined, correct? I mean, it's basically the position between there. Cool, it's undefined. So you can add anything you want at any position in your array, and it's cool. Let's show you the last way to add things. There's a couple other ways, but I want to show you one more. You can use something called push. Push says take this item and put it to the end of the array. So you can say push. We'll say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm going to take that number, put it to the end of the array. The array is now 27 items, and if you look at the last thing next to holy fish, it's the number. Okay? So that is how you add them. How to remove things? Well, we can also use the method. We can use list.pop, and an array has a lot of methods. I'll put a link in the description later, video description, that actually lists a few of these out. I like linking to Mozilla just because they have a significant, I think a pretty good set of docs that also have some opinion in it. I don't always agree with their opinion, but I like their opinions they kind of add to the docs. Keep in mind that there's a lot of other methods that are browser specific sometimes, and generally they're pretty good at documenting what those are. Okay, so if we call pop, it's going to take the last item of the array, remove it, and return it to you. So list.pop will return a value. So it's going to print out the value, the last value, and right, that's the value. Now if we print the list again, you'll see that item is removed. Okay, so the list is now back to 26 items. So that item is gone. Okay, so let's say we want to take list. What is list item 26? Just want to see what it is, undefined. All right, list 25 is the last item in the array, right? Holy fish. And again, this is what gets challenging for people on zero-based arrays, is that the length is 26, but the last item is 25 because it's zero-based, right? So a common way is to say list.length minus 1 to get the last item. It's the trick you memorize when you're dealing with these kind of languages, okay? So we have list 25. What if we set it to null? You know, it's null, it's nothing, right? Nothing. And then say list.length. Well, it's still 26. What if we say list 25 equals undefined? Again, undefined is a valid value, right, that you can set. You usually don't set it yourself, but you can. If you look at list.length again, it's still going to be 26, right? So how do you remove that? Well, there's one other way you can remove a specific item at a specific position. In this case, we're going to do it at the end. We're not going to use pop. We're going to use splice. Now, splice takes 2 parameters. First is, what position are you cutting at? Like cutting at. Are you starting from 0, or are you starting way somewhere else in an array? What index, right? Number 2 is, how many items do you want me to delete starting from that position? Most common is 1, right? So we'll say, starting at position 25, delete that particular item. And it returns back that, okay? Cool. Now that item's gone. You can see it's there. And then list.length is 25. So that's another way you can remove particular items from that. Now, if some of these methods seem strange, like popping and pushing and splicing and setting indices, this is why a lot of these libraries exist, is they want to, like, say, list.add and list.remove item at. You can write functions to abstract this, and other people have in other languages. Sometimes people come from other languages and like those method names, and they don't like the JavaScript one, so they are used to that API, right? You can do that as well. When we get into functions, you'll see how you can do that. So what if you wanted to iterate through this array and print items out? So I'm going to go back to Sublime here, and we'll write a for loop. Again, you should never use single letter interlators like I. You should say iterator, but I'm a slacker, so I'm not going to do it. I ain't going to do it. We're going to say, how long are you going to loop for? I is less than list.length. Now, because arrays are zero-based, it'll stop when it gets to the end, right? So once I is 26, it'll stop. Well, in this case, 25, but you know what I mean. I++, and then we'll say list I. Now you'll notice that I use the I. I'm going to just do a plus for now. So you'll notice I use the I as a dynamic array accessor, or assessor, or however you say it. So I'm using I to identify dynamically that particular position. So when the loop starts, it's going to be 0, right? Because we defined I up here as 0, okay? We set it to 0, that's what it's going to start at. Every loop, this I is going to increase because that's what we did. We increased it by 1 each loop. So when you run this guy, he's going to print out each one of these elements to the screen. Jesse, Brandy, Toby, Null, undefined, and 34. Make sense? So you can see it printed out all indices of 0 all through 5, and printed out each items of the array in order, right? So that is how you loop through an array. Now, let's do some funky additions here. Let's take an array, we'll blank it out, okay? And we're going to add a number to every one, and we're going to increment it by 3. So I've shown you this example before, but we're going to do it again using the I to do double duty. Number 1, it's going to be the indice, and number 2, it's going to actually be an increment value, okay? So we're going to say list at position I equals I. Okay, so take the current iteration position in the array and set it to what the current iteration value is. Every time the loop goes through, it's going to increment that number, right? So we should have an array that matches 0 through 5. Log it, and we're going to add, let's just do it up to 10. So we iterate 10 times, add 10 numbers. Okay, and there you go. We have a list that is incremented each time, has 10 items, each incremented with that particular I. Make sense? So that is a simple way to add items. So let's play with some more array methods. Let's go back to our console here. Let's clear it out. I like how you take clear and it's like undefined because clear doesn't return anything. It's like typical computer science people, man. There's another one called shift and unshift. So watch this. We're going to create our list. Uno, dos, tres. If I could do the accent, my college experience would have been so much different. Are you implying that you would have had mad chicas? Yes, it'd be great. All right, that's my Deadpool impression right there. All right, so we have a list. We got 3 items in it. We're going to do a list.shift. Now, shift takes the first item out of the array and takes it off. So it's very similar to pop. Pop takes the last item in the array. Shift takes the first item in the array, gives it back to you and says, all right, now the list is got it removed. Now you have dos and tres, right? There's another one called unshift, right, which does the opposite. You can actually take an item and put it in the front of the array. Very similar to push, except push it puts it at the end. So we'll say list.unshift. Uno. Returns the length. I know it's different, but whatever. And our array is back to the way it was. Again, shift removes the first item. Unshift adds an item to the beginning of the array. Pop removes the last item in the array. And push adds an item to the array. Right? So those are your 4 methods of actually dealing with things. For everything else, there's array index operators. So as list, let's say 2, I actually want to equal 2, 3. Print out our list. Cool, we've added it to the position of 2. We can also say list position of 1 equals to word. Print out our list. You can also do a splice. What I didn't show you with splice is it actually has a third parameter, which is rest-based, meaning you can add as many parameters as you want after the first 2 to add any amount of items. So we'll say list.splice. That was the Boston version. Speaking of Boston, anybody see that Batman with Ben Affleck? Like the best tweet. What did they say? I think Kevin Schmidt was telling me this on Facebook. Like, Rabin, go ask the governor. Anyway, it was funny in my head. All right, so splice. You can take item 2, item 1, and we're going to delete item 1, that huge LDSDK thing. We're going to add moo. We're going to add cow. And 42. Blue 42. Returns that item that you spliced out, right, as an array. And voila, we have spliced out that item and added this other set of items that we wanted to add, which are moo, cow, and 42, right, at position 1. Pretty rad, man. There's a lot of different things where you want to get a copy of the array. Now, if you remember, we're going to get briefly into by val and by ref right now, but the array that you get is just a reference to the actual array in memory, right? There is no by val for arrays in JavaScript. So if you want to get a copy of that array to play with it and sort it, so if you want to get a reference to that array, we can use the concat functionality. So what we're going to do is say var a equals list. And we'll say, all right, what is a? A is our list. Cool. List is our list. But here's the problem. It's just a reference. So you modify a, it's the same thing as modifying list. Okay, this is not how string and numbers work. This is by reference. It's just a reference to that same array. They all point to the same array, right? So for example, if I say, all right, a, what is your length? Your length is 5. All right, what if I say your length is now 4? As you can see, that's another way to remove items from the end of the array. Well, here's the problem. Watch list. It's now modified. I didn't mean to modify list. And this is who people who don't understand by ref, they run into this a lot with objects and arrays. So, okay, cool. I need a copy of array to play with so I can have some fun with that without modifying the original list. What you can do is say, all right, here is my copy. We'll say list.concat. Now, concat has no parameters if you don't want to. You can add them, you don't have to. So let's just not use it with parameters right now. All right, so we have a list. We have here's my copy. Okay, now watch this. If I go here's my copy and I pop the last item, remember? Remove the last item from the end of the array. And we say, okay, that's 42. So what does here's my copy look like now? Cool. What does the list look like? It's different, right? It's a completely separate list. Whew, okay. So that concat's really good for that because you can get a copy of the array and play with it. Now, remember when we sorted the array by alphabetical order? Well, what if we want to reverse the order, right? You could pass an assort method to do that, but it's a lot of work. You could also just call list.reverse. Okay, that's our list. And here's my copy. So as you can see, they're completely different order, right? We've reversed everything. Uno is now last. Moo and cow are backwards because cow moo, not moo cow. And 42. So that's another way you can do it. You can call it again, and it'll reverse it again, right? Really quick, really fast, built in. No need to use libraries for that, everything else. Now, I've shown you how concat will concatenate, right? All right, before we look at advanced uses of concatenate, let's show you how you can slice just a portion of the array that you want to get a new array. So it's not a reference, it's actually a new array of the items that you want to slice out of, right, and get a copy of. So I just want the strings from list. So I'm going to say sliced equals list.slice 2 parameters, okay? So I want to start from the beginning, and we're going to get up to 2. I don't care about 42, okay? So sliced will get us all the way from 0 to 2. Now, you're wondering, like, well, I thought 2 is an index. No, 2 is the length. So start index, second parameter is length. So for example, if you want the actual slice to equal list dot all the way up to cow, then you'd say 3. I want to start at index of 0, and I want it to be 3 from that. So 0, 1, 2, right? Which is 3. Confused yet? Yeah, I know. Well, they're an ECMA standard. An international committee of smart people agreed on this. So clearly, we're dumb and they're smart, right? This is why I love JavaScript. They look out for me. They have my needs in their hands. They care about me. My programming career. I love it. So the cool thing about this sliced array is that it's also a unique array. It's like a copy of it. So we can play with this one, reverse it, and it doesn't affect the original array, right? It's a slice. It's a unique copy. You slice it out and you make a copy of it. So slice is really not a good word because it actually is giving you a copy. So that's slice. If you have an array but it's really long, or you don't know if something's in it or not, how do I tell if my name is in that particular person's array? Or how do I tell if that particular score value is in that array, right? How do I test that? Well, the array has two operations to do that. The first is index of. Index of is, hey, does this array have this item in it? And last index of is, hey, does this have this item in it? If so, can you start counting from the back on back, right? So the last particular index. So index of will actually return the first value found. You can say, hey, start looking not from the beginning, but over here, right? Most of the time, you're going to start from the 0 position and work your way back, right? Last index of, very rarely used. So, usually. So I want to know, does this list array, does this have cow? So we can say list.index of cow. It'll say, yes, it's at 2, position 2. Oh, really? Okay. List 2, that's cow. Cool, there it is. You can also nest it. Now this will make sense when we get into functions later, but you can also nest it. So we'll say index of cow, right? And we'll use that return value as the index. Now this isn't really good practice, and I'll explain why in a second. Watch this. It's the same thing. It returns 2. We can use that as the way to access the index of the array. If index of doesn't find anything, it's going to return a -1, which means, dude, it's not in this array, it's -1. Because 0 is valid, right? 0 is the beginning. If it returns -1, like, dude, it's not in this array, I don't know what to tell you, right? So that's why you shouldn't always do this, because if it's -1, list of -1 does stuff like this. Undefined. There is no negative position. It should blow up, but it's like, no, I'm going to be nice and just tell you, like, it's ethereal. It's astral plane territory, bro. There's nothing there. So that is using index of. And last index of is in this case, going to give us the same one. So just to give you an example, let's go list push cow. Okay, we now have 5 listed out. We have cow in 2 places, at position 2 and position 4, right? So position 2, position 4, right? We have 2 cows. So if we say index of, it's going to give us the first position of 2. It's not going to give us 4. List last index of is going to give us 4, or the last position. If we say, hey, index of, can you start counting from position 3, which is the second parameter? It'll then give us 4 as well, right? So just another way to say these are these methods that will quickly look up if something's in there or not, okay? Those are the index methods. So that is advanced arrays with for loops mashed in together to give you some better clarity on it. And I hope that gives you a better understanding of some of the basics you can do with arrays. And again, I know I've said that there's a bunch of libraries out there to abstract these things and do all kinds of cool functionality, but it's important to know that you can do a lot of these that are very fast, built in, and you don't have to use those libraries. Just be aware of cross-browser compatibility issues with certain methodologies and certain functions that you're trying to do, okay? And if you're interested, the libraries handle it for you. You don't have to worry about it. They fall back to native, so they don't really slow it down too much. If that's what your concern is, you don't have to like not use them. A lot of the more mature ones that are, like underscores and others, they'll fall back to the native thing if it's there. If not, they'll take care of you. Okay? So that's advanced arrays.